London, 1888. The streets of Whitechapel reeked of smoke, damp cobblestones, and the acrid scent of too many bodies pressed into too little space. The gaslights flickered weakly against the thick fog that rolled in from the Thames, shrouding the alleys in shadows where few dared to walk alone. And yet, someone lurked in those very shadows, someone whose name would be whispered in terror for generations to come. It began with a single body. Marion Polly Nichols was found sprawled in Bucks Row, her throat slashed so deeply it nearly severed her head. But it wasn't just her death that horrified the people of London. It was the way she had been butchered. Deep, precise incisions ran down her abdomen. Her body laid open as if the killer had been searching for something. The police arrived quickly, led by Inspector Frederick Aberline, a seasoned detective who had seen more than his share of bloodshed. But even he wasn't prepared for what lay before him. There were no signs of struggle, no blood trail leading away from the scene. It was as if the killer had melted into the fog itself. Whitechapel was no stranger to violence. The slums were overrun with crime, desperation, and disease. But this was different. This was calculated. This was deliberate. Within days, another woman was dead. Annie Chapman's body was found in the early hours of September 8th in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her injuries were even more gruesome than Polly Nichols'. Her throat was slit, her body mutilated, her uterus missing. Panic spread through Whitechapel like wildfire. The newspapers dubbed the killer Jack the Ripper after a taunting letter was sent to the Central News Agency. The letter was written in red ink, signed with the now infamous name, and mocked the police, promising more deaths to come. Then, on September 30th, the Ripper struck again, twice in one night. Elizabeth Stride was found in Dutfield's yard, her throat freshly cut, her murder seemingly interrupted. Less than an hour later, Catherine Eddowes was discovered in Mitre Square, her body dissected with chilling precision. This time, the killer had taken more than just body parts. He had left behind a cryptic clue. A piece of Eddowes' apron, soaked in blood, was found discarded near Golston Street. Above it, scrawled in chalk on a brick wall, were the words. The police, fearing an anti-Semitic riot, quickly erased the message, but questions remained. Was it a message from the killer himself? A red herring? Or something far more sinister? Whitechapel was gripped with terror. Women refused to walk the streets alone. Vigilante groups patrolled the alleys, desperate to catch the faceless butcher before he struck again. And then he did. On the bitterly cold night of November 9th, Mary Jane Kelly was found in her tiny room at 13 Miller's Court. But this was no ordinary crime scene. This was carnage. Her body was unrecognizable, her face all but removed, her organs scattered throughout the room like grotesque trophies. It was as if Jack the Ripper had reached the peak of his madness. And then nothing. The murders stopped as suddenly as they had begun. No more bodies. No more taunting letters. No more clues. Jack the Ripper had vanished, leaving behind only fear, speculation, and the haunting certainty that he had walked among them, unseen and unpunished. But just when the police thought they had lost him for good, a new piece of evidence emerged, something that would change the course of the investigation forever. Because on a quiet December morning, a young boy playing near the docks stumbled upon a discarded doctor's bag. Inside were blood-stained surgical instruments, a set of gloves, and, most chilling of all, a diary. A diary filled with detailed accounts of the murders, written in a careful, elegant hand, and signed simply, Jack. The discovery of the blood-stained doctor's bag sent shockwaves through the Whitechapel police force. Inspector Frederick Aberline stood in the dimly lit station, carefully flipping through the brittle pages of the diary. Each entry was methodical, almost surgical in its descriptions of the murders. The handwriting was precise, devoid of emotion, except the final, chilling signature, Jack. For the first time, the Ripper had left something tangible behind, a confession in ink. But was it real, or another cruel joke played by a city gripped in terror? Aberline ordered the bag and diary to be locked away in evidence. This was their best lead yet, and he couldn't afford to have it compromised. By the next morning, the news had leaked. Whitechapel was buzzing. The newspapers printed lurid headlines. Jack the Ripper's diary found. Police close in on London's most feared maniac. Reporters swarmed Scotland Yard, demanding answers. Meanwhile, the city braced itself, wondering if this meant an end to the nightmare, or if it was only the beginning. Then, something even more baffling happened. The diary, locked securely in an evidence cabinet, was gone. No signs of forced entry. No misplaced keys. Nothing. Just an empty cabinet where the most damning piece of evidence had once rested. Inspector Abeline was furious. Someone in the force had taken it. Or worse, someone outside had infiltrated their ranks. He ordered an immediate investigation, but no one had seen anything unusual. It was as if the diary had vanished into thin air. At the same time, a witness emerged, one who claimed to have seen something extraordinary on the night of Mary Jane Kelly's murder. Martha Linslow, a 52-year-old charwoman, arrived at the police station, clutching her shawl tightly around her thin frame. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I saw him, sir," she whispered. "I saw the devil himself." Aberline leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what you saw, Mrs. Linslow." She hesitated, glancing around as if fearing unseen eyes. "It was late. I was passing by Miller's Court, just after the church bells tolled 3. And there he was, standing in the alley, watching the room where the girl lay." "What did he look like?" "Not like a man at all," she murmured. "Like a shadow, tall and lean, wearing a black coat. But the thing I remember most was his eyes. They glowed red, sir, like embers in a fire." Abeline sighed. Another fantastical tale. Fear had warped the minds of Whitechapel's people, turning their nightmares into reality. Still, there was something about the way Martha spoke, her conviction, that unsettled him. "Did you see his face?" he asked. She hesitated. "No, sir, but he weren't alone. There was another man, stepped behind him. Looked like a doctor, he did." Abeline's breath hitched. A doctor? Was it possible? Could Jack the Ripper have had an accomplice? As the investigation continued, pressure on the police intensified. Scotland Yard was accused of incompetence, of deliberately hiding the killer's identity to protect someone important. Some claimed the Ripper was a member of the royal family. Others swore it was a Freemason conspiracy. The whispers of cover-ups grew louder, and Abeline found himself caught between solving the case and quelling a city on the brink of hysteria. Then, just as things couldn't get stranger, an unsigned letter arrived at Scotland Yard. The handwriting was nearly identical to the missing diary's entries. "You will never catch me. The game is nearly over. But soon, the streets will run red once more." It was signed, simply, Jack. That same evening, a constable patrolling near the docks found something chilling. A body. But it wasn't one of the Ripper's usual victims. This was a man, dressed in a fine coat, his hands clean and uncalloused. He was no common worker. His throat had been slashed, but unlike the other victims, his body had not been mutilated. A single note was pinned to his chest. "You should have stayed silent." Abeline knew then that they were dealing with something far more complex than a lone madman butchering women in the streets. Someone else was involved. Someone powerful. And Jack the Ripper wasn't done yet. The air inside Scotland Yard was thick with tension. Inspector Frederick Abeline held the unsigned letter in one hand and the coroner's report on the recently discovered body in the other. The dead man, now identified as Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, was no ordinary victim. He had ties to the Royal London Hospital, just minutes from Whitechapel. A respected surgeon, Blackwood had also been questioned, though never formally charged, months earlier when rumors circulated that Jack the Ripper possessed medical expertise. Now he was dead, and the note pinned to his chest suggested he had known too much. Abeline looked up at his fellow officers. "If Blackwood was murdered," he said slowly, "that means either he was a Ripper," he paused, "or he was silenced by the real killer." Silence filled the room. If Blackwood had been involved in some way, his murder meant the Ripper wasn't working alone. Or worse, there was an entire network protecting him. And then a constable burst into the room, his face pale as death. "Sir," he panted, "another letter has arrived." Abeline snatched the envelope from the constable's trembling hands. The familiar slanted handwriting sent a chill through him. He unfolded the paper and read aloud. They think they are closing in. Let them try. I walk among them every night, and they do not see me. But I see them, and I am not finished yet. Signed, asterisk, asterisk, Jack, asterisk, asterisk. The room was deathly quiet. Aberline gritted his teeth. Jack the Ripper wasn't done. And now, the case had taken a darker turn. That evening, just as Scotland Yard reeled from the letter's implications, a nervous man arrived at the station. "I need to speak with Inspector Aberline," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about the murders." Aberline met with him in a dimly lit interrogation room. The man introduced himself as Henry Grayson, a local bartender who had worked in several establishments around Whitechapel. He had seen things that didn't add up. "I served Blackwood 2 nights ago," Grayson revealed. He was drunk, scared, kept looking over his shoulder, muttering to himself. Said something about the doctor knowing too much. Aberline narrowed his eyes. "Another doctor?" Grayson nodded. "I didn't catch the name, but Blackwood said he wasn't alone. Said they were watching him." "They?" Aberline pressed. "Who was he afraid of?" Before Grayson could answer, a loud crash echoed from outside. A gunshot rang out. Aberline rushed to the window, his heart hammering. In the street below, a body lay crumpled on the cobblestone. Henry Grayson. A shadowy figure darted into an alleyway before disappearing into the night. By the time Aberline and his men reached Grayson, the bartender was dead, shot clean through the heart. His pockets had been turned out, as if someone had taken something from him. A witness silenced. With Grayson dead, Aberline turned his attention back to Blackwood's ties to the medical community. A search of Blackwood's residence turned up something unexpected. A book bound in red leather, hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside were pages filled with strange symbols, cryptic phrases, and, most chilling of all, sketches of the Ripper's victims. Their wounds had been drawn in precise detail, annotated with medical terminology. But one phrase, repeated throughout the book, stood out. Aberline's breath caught. Was this the key to the mystery? A secret society connected to the murders? It wasn't the first time whispers of Freemasons and clandestine groups had surfaced in connection with the Ripper case. But now, for the first time, he had proof that something bigger was at play. And then, as if to confirm his fears, the book, despite being locked in Scotland Yard's evidence room, vanished without a trace by morning. Someone within the police force was covering for the killer. With every new discovery, the case grew darker. But nothing could have prepared Aberline for what came next. Late one night, he received an anonymous tip. A woman's voice, shaking with fear, whispered over the line, "Miller's Court. Look beneath the floor." Aberline wasted no time. He and his men arrived at the crime scene, the very room where Mary Jane Kelly had been butchered. The blood had long since dried, but the horror of the crime still lingered in the walls. Following the tip, they pried up the floorboards. What they found sent them reeling. Buried beneath the floor was a collection of objects, women's rings, torn scraps of clothing, and a small, rusted surgical scalpel. But the worst was yet to come. A skull, not of an adult, a child. Aberline stepped back, his mind spinning. What was this? A sick trophy? Or had the Ripper's reign of terror started long before the killings in Whitechapel? Then, one of his men found something else. A single scrap of parchment, half rotted and stained with age. Scrawled across it in faded ink were just 5 words. Aberline felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Had Jack the Ripper truly stopped? Or had he simply changed his methods? And worse, what if he was never just one man to begin with? The discovery beneath Miller's Court sent shockwaves through London. A child's skull, a collection of macabre trophies, and a cryptic warning. It was too much for even the most hardened investigators. The press seized the story, weaving headlines of terror. Jack the Ripper, a murder before Whitechapel. New evidence suggests more victims. Was he ever stopped? A secret society protecting a killer? Panic spread like wildfire. Women no longer dared walk the streets alone. Some claimed to hear whispers in the alleyways at night, and others swore they saw shadowy figures watching from fog. But for Inspector Frederick Aberline, fear was a distraction. He was closer than ever to the truth, and he knew that whoever had buried those objects beneath Miller's court had done so for a reason. Someone wanted them to find it, and someone else wanted it buried forever. The anonymous tip that led Aberline to the gruesome discovery couldn't be ignored. The voice on the other end of the line had been a woman's, frantic, terrified. He needed to find her before she vanished like Henry Grayson. Tracking the call, the officers traced it to a dingy boarding house in Whitechapel. But when they arrived, the room was empty. Only a single message had been scratched into the wooden table with what looked like a surgical blade. "I tried to warn you." The landlady, an elderly woman with wary eyes, claimed the room had been rented under the name Mary P. Mary Piercy? Aberline whispered to himself. The name sent a jolt through him. Piercy was a known killer, a woman convicted just a year prior for the brutal slaying of her lover's wife and child. Some believed she had ties to the Ripper case, had even been suspected at one point, but she had been hanged in 1890. Was this a coincidence? Or had someone else adopted her name as a taunt? That night, as Aberline walked the dimly lit streets of Whitechapel, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every whisper carried in the wind felt like a warning. And then he saw him, a tall figure, dressed in dark clothing, standing beneath the glow of a gas lamp. His face was obscured by a hat, but his posture was eerily familiar. Aberline reached for his revolver, stepping forward. "Jack!" he called out. The figure turned. Just for a second, Aberline saw his face, angular, sharp, intelligent, and then, like a specter, he disappeared into the fog. Aberline sprinted after him, his heart hammering. He turned the corner, but the alley was empty. The only thing left behind was a single scrap of cloth, a piece of an apron, stained with something dark. The same kind of apron taken from Catherine Eddowes, the Ripper's fourth victim. It was fresh. Jack the Ripper was still in Whitechapel. Determined to uncover the truth, Aberline delved deeper into the life of Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, the surgeon murdered days earlier. Blackwood's records revealed something shocking. He had once worked alongside another doctor at the Royal London Hospital, a Dr. Alexander Graves. The name didn't appear on any recent records. No address, no patients. It was as if he had vanished years ago. But Aberline wasn't convinced. He sent officers to search every hospital, every asylum. And finally they found something. A patient admitted under the name John Crane had been institutionalized at Bethlehem Royal Hospital, better known as Bedlam. The man had been committed in 1891, just 3 years after the Ripper killings. When Aberline arrived, the staff hesitated. "He's not like the others," one nurse whispered. "He's different." Led through the cold, dimly lit corridors, Aberline reached a small, windowless room. Inside, a man sat in a chair, staring at the wall. Dr. Alexander Graves. Or, as some believed, Jack the Ripper. The moment Aberline entered, Graves turned to him. His lips curled into a slight smile. "I wondered when you'd come," he murmured. Aberline's pulse quickened. "You knew Blackwood, didn't you?" Graves chuckled. "Knew him? I trained him." The realization hit, like a punch. If Blackwood had been a suspect, what if he had only been a student? "You were the real killer," Aberline whispered. "Blackwood took the fall, but you—" Graves tilted his head. "You've spent so many years chasing a phantom," he said softly. "Did you ever stop to wonder if Jack the Ripper was more than just a man?" Aberline clenched his fists. "You're a monster." Graves leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a student of death, and I was never alone." Before Aberline could react, the lights flickered. A nurse screamed from down the hall. The guards rushed forward. By the time they turned back, Graves was gone. The door hadn't been opened. The window had never been broken. And yet, he had vanished. London was never the same. Despite an exhaustive search, Dr. Alexander Graves was never found. Some believed he had escaped. Others whispered he had never truly existed at all. The case of Jack the Ripper faded into history, but rumors persisted. A shadowy figure spotted in alleyways, an unidentified doctor performing strange experiments, a faceless specter watching from the fog. And then, in 1903, a new letter arrived at Scotland Yard. The handwriting was the same as the infamous Ripper letters. It read, simply, "Did you miss me?" The vanishing of Dr. Alexander Graves sent shockwaves through London. A man believed to be tied to one of the most infamous murder cases in history had slipped through the hands of Scotland Yard without a trace. Despite an exhaustive manhunt, no confirmed sightings of Graves ever surfaced. Some whispered that he had fled the country, hiding under a new name. Others believed something far stranger, that Jack the Ripper was never meant to be caught. With no suspect in custody and no new evidence, the case once again slipped into the realm of legend. But the fear, the unease remained. And just when it seemed like the horrors of Whitechapel would finally fade into history, another letter arrived. In 1903, nearly 15 years after the last confirmed Ripper killing, a chilling letter was delivered to Scotland Yard. The handwriting matched the infamous Ripper letters. It read simply, "Did you miss me?" Investigators scrambled to determine its origin. Some believed it was a hoax, an attempt to resurrect the terror for notoriety. Others weren't so sure. Reports emerged from the east end of Whitechapel once more. Shadows moving in alleyways. Women disappearing without a trace. A man with surgical precision carving symbols into abandoned buildings. Was it possible that Jack had returned? Or had he never truly left? Over the decades, countless theories have attempted to explain the mystery of Jack the Ripper. Some believe the Ripper was a doctor, a man with surgical knowledge, perhaps even Dr. Alexander Graves himself. But if so, where did he go? Others suggest a royal cover-up, claiming that Prince Albert Victor, a member of the British royal family, had ties to the murders, either as a participant or as someone protected by the crown. Some posit that Jack was never one man at all, but a network of killers, a secret society operating in the shadows, covering for one another, ensuring their dark work remained undiscovered. And then there are those who lean into the supernatural, stories of an entity that stalks the streets of Whitechapel, taking new forms, choosing new victims, whispering in the ears of men who are willing to carry on his work. None of these theories have been proven, but none have been disproven either. Jack the Ripper's reign of terror did more than just claim lives. It changed history. His brutal murders exposed the horrific conditions of Whitechapel, where poverty and crime thrived unchecked. It forced England to reckon with its failing police system, leading to reforms in investigative techniques, forensic science, and media relations. The case also transformed the world of true crime. Jack the Ripper became the first modern serial killer, his legend immortalized in books, films, and whispered tales of the macabre. And yet, for all the ink spilled and theories debated, one truth remains. Jack the Ripper was never caught. His identity remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Even now, in the fog-drenched streets of Whitechapel, the past lingers. Locals whisper of eerie footsteps echoing in the alleys at night. Tourists report seeing a dark figure watching from the shadows, a man in a long coat, his face obscured. Some say if you stand on Dorset Street at midnight, you can hear a voice behind you, whispering the same words scribbled on the walls over a century ago. The jurors are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. It is as if the case itself refuses to die. Perhaps because the Ripper never truly left. Or perhaps because he was never meant to be found. And so we're left with one final question. Did Jack the Ripper vanish into history? Or is he still out there, watching, waiting, ready to return? If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the horrors of Whitechapel, please consider liking this video to support our work. Your engagement helps us bring even more chilling true crime stories to life. We want to hear from you. Who do you think Jack the Ripper really was? Was he a doctor, a madman, or something even darker? Share your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We explore history's darkest mysteries, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for being part of this journey into the shadows of the past. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.